Hi, and welcome back to Project Wingspan's Seed Collection Training webinar. I'm Elizabeth Kaufman, the plant ecologist here at Pollinator Partnership, and in this section we're going to be reviewing the 29 target plant species in our collection list. I'd like to remind you that there are very detailed plant profiles available for download. You can find them in Appendix A of the training manuals, where you'll find in-depth plant descriptions, key identifying characteristics, and multiple photos, as well as instructions on seed collection. The first plants we're going to discuss are the milkweeds. As many of you know already, milkweeds are the only host plant for the monarch butterfly. We're including 5 species of milkweed in our collection efforts for Project Wingspan. These include common milkweed, swamp milkweed, whorled milkweed, butterfly milkweed, and pulp milkweed. Asclepias syriaca, or common milkweed, as the name implies, can be found growing in many different environments. It likes disturbance, which is why it's associated with fields and roadsides. The individual plants have a single stem and most often will be found growing in clusters as it reproduces by root as well as by seed. The plants can grow 6.5 feet tall. The leaf arrangement is opposite, and the leaves are broadly ovate to elliptical, and they're on short petioles or leaf stems. The flowers are brown umbel clusters that are made up of 20 to 30 small pink-white flowers per cluster. They bloom from June through August. The fruit, or seed pod, is tiered-shaped and will have these warty projectile surfaces. The pods will be gold to gray-brown when they're ripe. Asclepias incarnata, or swamp milkweed, as its common name implies, prefers moist soils and can be found near bodies of water, as well as in wet meadows and prairies. It has a single reddish stem that grows from the base, but it branches multiple times near the top of the plant. The plant can grow up to 6 feet tall. Its leaves are long and narrow and lance-shaped. Its flowers are bright pink, purple, and white, and they form in more open clusters in comparison to common milkweed. They bloom from July through September. Their fruit, unlike the common milkweed, are smooth and they form in narrow tear-shaped pods. These pods will turn brown when they're ripe and ready for seed collection. Asclepias verticillata, or whorled milkweed, can be found growing in prairies and in forest openings. Whorled milkweed is single-stemmed and grows 1 to 3 feet tall. It's easily distinguished by its leaves, which are narrow and linear and grow in whorls around the stem. Small greenish-white flowers occur in flat-top clusters on the upper part of the stem, and the seed pods are long and thin, as shown here, and can be collected in mid to late September. So please be aware that while Asclepias verticillata, or whorled milkweed, is common in most Project Wingspan states, we will not be collecting this in Pennsylvania due to potential changes in legal status. Asclepias tuberosa, or butterfly milkweed, occurs in drier and rockier areas, including prairies, fields, and roadsides. It typically grows in clumps 1 to 3 feet tall. Its leaves are narrow and lance-shaped, and its flowers grow in clustered umbels that are really hard to miss. This bright orange to orange-yellow flower, which is a favorite of butterflies, can be seen quite from a distance. Flowering occurs earlier than other milkweeds and will begin in June and will last through August. The seed pods are spindle-shaped and usually about 3 to 6 inches long. Asclepias exaltata, or pulp milkweed, grows in woodland openings and edges. It grows from 2 to 6 feet tall, and it's usually unbranched. The leaves are opposite and about 3 to 8 inches long and 1 to 3 inches wide. The leaf shape is lanceolate to elliptic to ovate, and they're smooth along the margin. Both the tips and the bottoms of the leaf are wedge-shaped rather than rounded and have petioles or leaf stems. The flowers form in loose umbels approximately 2 to 4 inches across. This is the loosest arrangement of flowers of all the milkweed. The flowers are bicolored with green or pale purple petals and hoods that are white or light pink. Spreading dogbane can be confused with milkweed because of its white, milky sap, but this plant is easily distinguished as it's very branching, 2 to 5 feet, and it grows 2 to 5 feet tall. Its flowers can be distinguished from milkweed with their simple bell-shaped arrangement, and the seed pod, which looks like vanilla beans, hanging downward versus milkweeds that have the seed pods growing upwards. So when you're collecting milkweed pods, you don't want to harvest the seed pods before they're ripe. You periodically are going to want to go back and check the progress of the pod as they turn from this green, light green color to this pale brown or golden color. You'll know that they're ripe and ready. Collection time for most of the milkweeds is going to be in the late summer to early fall. Again, you want to collect the seed pods when they're turning yellow to grayish brown, and then they begin to split open. And when they do begin to split open, you're going to see this white fluff. The seeds themselves should be brown and plump. And you don't want to collect seed pods that have holes in them as they likely, that's likely due to insect damage, which would make the seed non-viable. When you have found full, whole, viable pods, you want to split the pod open, remove the fluff, and then follow the protocols for dry seed storage. Although it might seem obvious to some, we want to make sure that we're not collecting milkweed pods that are infested with giant milkweed beetles. These beetles that are orange and black damage the seed and make it non-viable. Milkweed beetles will not eat their way into the pods, but they'll wait until the pods are starting to open. The next plants that we're going to talk about are composites that can be shaken or gently mashed or broken up to release the seeds. Please remember to refer to Appendix A for more detailed plant ID descriptions, as well as instructions for drying your seed collections. The first species we'll talk about is Heliopsis helianthoides, or ox-eye sunflower. This species is an upright, clump-forming, short-lived perennial that's native to both eastern and central North America. It typically grows about 3 to 4 feet tall, and its flowers here are about 2 to 3 inches in diameter and have these orange-yellow rays, and they surround yellow-brownish center cone. The flowers bloom pretty much throughout the entire summer. The leaves are ovate and are toothed and grow up to 6 inches long. Some of the key features for differentiating this species from other similar looking species is that both the ray and the disc flowers are fertile. The flower heads also sit more erect than some of the other, or in comparison to other sunflowers. Because it can be confused with many other BYFs, as we call them, big yellow flowers, it's best to keep this one out in the field if you have any questions. The seeds for the species are going to be ripe about a month after flowering. The seed is going to be ready to harvest when the heads turn from yellow to brown. These plants are notorious for being self-sterile, so you really want to crack some seeds open before collecting to check for viability. This is a great place to perform a seed cut test. Once you found viable plants, you want to place the entire dried flower head into your collection bag, and then you can gently mash the flower head in the palm of your hand to remove any remaining seed. Coreopsis tripteris, or tall Coreopsis, typically grows 4 to 8 feet tall. You can find it occurring in prairies and in open woodlands and along woodland margins. Tall Coreopsis has this solitary yellow flower that's about 1 to 2 inches in diameter. It has 8 yellow rays and it's surrounded by this flat brown yellow center. It flowers usually from mid to late summer and then also into the fall. If you crush its leaves, it's going to smell a little bit like anise. The leaves also are very distinguishable because they're parted into these 3 narrow lance-shaped segments. The collection time for this species is also late summer through the fall. So in comparison to other Coreopsis species, tall Coreopsis has greater height. It also has a later bloom period, and its flower heads have those dark purple or maroon centers. Go back, these, in comparison with the yellow centers found in most other Coreopsis species. Another distinguishing factor with the tall Coreopsis, again, are these lance-shaped segmented leaves. Echinacea purpurea is a favorite of many and commonly known. It's native to moist prairies and meadows, and you can also find it in open woodlands. It typically grows about 2 to 4 feet tall. It has broadly ovate to broad lanceolate leaves. The collection time for the species is also late summer to early fall. The seed is going to be ready to harvest when the heads turn dark brown to black. It should be noted that while Echinacea purpurea is common in most of the Project Wingspan states, it is not so in Pennsylvania, and we will not be collecting due to potential changes in legal status. Ratibida pinnata, or yellow cone yellow prairie coneflower typically occurs in dry woods and in drier prairie sites. It has pinnately divided leaves that are typically 5 inches long. The plant grows about 3 to 5 feet tall, and the flowers have these dull gray center discs that are shaped sort of in an elongated cylinder. And then it has 3 to 7 extremely reflexed or pointing downward bright yellow ray flowers. The ray flowers are approximately 3 inches long. If you bruise the disc, the inner part here, it's going to smell of anise, which is another great key identifying factor. The collection time for the species is typically in the late summer. You'll know that the seeds are ripe when the cone becomes hard and turns sort of grayish or dark brown. You want to remove the entire cone and put that into the collection bag. Again, this species, although common in most of our Project Wingspan states, is not so in Pennsylvania, therefore will not be collected. Rudbeckia hirta, or black-eyed Susan, is a common native wildflower, which you can typically find in open woodlands and in prairies and fields and along roadsides. It is really a coarse hairy plant, as pictured here. These short bristles cover both the leaves and the stems. The plant typically grows to be about 1 to 3 feet tall. The flowers of the species are about 3 inches across, and they have bright yellow to orange yellow rays. Black-eyed Susans bloom out through all the summer months, and the collection time is usually the late summer through early fall. You know that the seeds are ripe when the cone turns dark gray to dark brown and becomes hard. This usually is going to occur about 3 to 4 weeks after the blooms fade. Cephalanthus occidentalis, or buttonbush, is our one woody shrub that we are including in our target species. You can typically find this species around pods and in the margins of streams or in other moist soil conditions, including in prairie swales, in marshes, and in creeks. The leaves you will find in pairs or in threes and grow up to 8 inches long. They're ovate and sometimes just a little bit narrower than that. They have a pointed tip, as seen here, and a rounded and tapered base. The flowers are small, as shown here. They're really distinctive. You'll find them in these dense spherical clusters or heads with this fringe, as you can see here, of pistils. The trunks of the species is also at times twisted, which is a great identifying key factor. The collection time for seeds of this species will be the late summer to early fall before the nutlets start to fall apart, which are shown here. The nuts, the nuts are ready for collection when they turn brown. And to collect, you want to cut the entire nutlet off the stem and put that into your collection bag. Again, with a gentle smashing, you can release the seed. The next group of species that we're going to talk about are those that have seeds that can fly away or that are transported by wind. Cirsium discolor, or field thistle, those habits include moist to dry prairies and meadows. You can also find them in openings and woodland areas, and near rivers and fields and in open areas. Field thistle is a biennial or a short-lived perennial that initially is going to form as a low basal rosette. After the first year, it's going to bolt and become about 2 to 8 feet tall. The leaves are alternate and they're really spiny, as you can see pictured here. They're pinnately lobed and about 3 inches long, 3 inches across, and 9 inches long. On the upper surface, they're going to be green, and on the lower surface, they look almost powdery white due to the pubescence hairs. The flowers occur on individual erect stalks, and these flower heads are about 2 inches across and light pink. Rarely, they're also white. This species blooms from late summer through fall, and each flower lasts for about a month on each individual plant. So field thistle can be distinguished from a non-native bowl thistle by the white undersides of its leaves. In comparison, the bowl thistle has green undersides. The bowl thistle also has these thick, coarse spines. And field thistle is not as aggressive as bowl thistle, so you'll find it in smaller numbers. And the flowers of the field thistle also are a bit smaller in comparison to tall thistle, which is another native, but these can easily be differentiated by the deeply pinnate lobes. Eupatorium perfoliatum, or common boneset, is a large, hairy, clump-forming perennial. You can typically find the species in wet soils, in woodlands and in thickets, as well as in meadows and in prairies. It has these white, flat-top clusters of small flowers, and these flowers appear in the late summer to early fall. The leaves are opposite and lancet, and they unite surrounding the stem, which is or perfoliate. They almost appear as one leaf. Common boneset can be distinguished from other bonesets by the perfoliate leaves that surround the central stem. The other species have opposite leaves that are either sessile, shown here with no stem, or have the steep petioles. All of these species have similar clusters of white flowers that appear somewhat similar, so it's best to keep the species out in the field. Euthymia graminifolia, or grass leaf goldenrod, can usually be found in moist to dry thickets as well as in open areas. It's going to grow 1 to 4 feet tall and has branched stems. It has these long, narrow, grass-like leaves. The larger leaves are going to have 3 obvious veins, sometimes 2 slightly more obscure veins. The yellow flowers form in these yellow flowers are going to form in these flat, open clusters, which is a key distinguishing factor from some of the other solidagos and goldenrods. The collection for the species usually takes place in mid-October. Eupatorium purpureum, or sweet Joe pieweed, occurs in moist grounds, on wooded slopes, in wet meadows, and as well as in thickets. This is really erect, clump-forming perennial, which typically grows 4 to 7 feet tall. It has coarsely serrated, lance-shaped dark green leaves that grow up to about 12 inches long. And these leaves are arranged in whorls of 3 to 5. It also has these purple nodes. The flowers are tiny. Oops. The flowers are tiny and have a bit of a vanilla scent. They form in these large compound inflorescences, which are dome-shaped. The species blooms in midsummer to early fall, and seed collection typically occurs in mid to late September. Other Joe pie species that closely resemble sweet, there are other Joe pie species that closely resemble sweet Joe, but they can be differentiated by their habitat preference. Sweet Joe pieweed prefers shadier habitats and has a solid green stem. It also has fewer whorled leaves and the domed inflorescence. And if we go back, it has this domed inflorescence in comparison to these other Eupatoriums. Liatris spicata, commonly called dense or spiked blazing star, is a tall, upright, clump-forming perennial which is native to moist, low grounds, meadows, and prairies. Typically, it grows about 2 to 4 feet tall, but it can reach a height of about 6 feet. It has terminal spikes that grow to be about 6 to 12 inches long. They have this roundish shape to them as well. They're made up of dense, arranged, deep purple flower heads. Each flower head is about 1/3 of an inch across. You find like 1 or more stalks arise from a basal tuft of narrow leaves. These leaves can grow to be up to 12 inches long. The stem leaves are going to gradually decrease as you go up the stem. This species blooms in summer, and the seed collection typically occurs around mid-September to early October. Liatris aspera, rough or button blazing star, is an upright clump-forming perennial which typically grows 2 to 5 feet tall. You're going to find it commonly occurring in dry soils on prairies and in open woodlands, glades, and in meadows. The flowers are this deep rose purple, and they're arranged along a long terminal flower spike. The flowers begin to bloom at the top of the stalk and then progress downward throughout the season. The stalks, again, are going to rise from this basal tuft of leaves, very narrow and lamp-shaped leaves. This species is easily distinguished from other Liatris species because of the flowers, which have this button-like appearance and these outflowering bracts. Rough blazing star blooms later in the late summer to fall than in comparison to other Liatris species. The seed collection typically occurs around mid-September through early October. This is another species that will not be collecting in Pennsylvania. Both dense and rough blazing stars can be distinguished from the other blazing stars by the size and the density and the appearance of their bracts. If we go back to a Liatris aspera, it has these rounded bracts here, and the edges fold inward, and the bract color is sort of green and it's tinged purple. With dense blazing star, the bracts are also green to purple, but they're overlapping and they have this oval shape. So again, the arrangement and the size of the bracts in comparison to the other three species make them easily distinguishable in the field. Symphyotrichum laeve, or smooth blue aster, typically occurs in prairies, but you'll also find it in dry open woodlands. This is a perennial plant that's 1.5 to 3 feet tall, and it branches greatly on the upper part of the plant. The alternate leaves occur along the entire length of the stem, and it gradually becomes smaller as you ascend the plant. So these are the lower leaves, and here, again, the upper leaves. Both the lower and upper leaves clasp the stems. The flowers are really small. They're distinct violet blue to purple, and sometimes white, and they have yellow center discs. They form in these loose, open panicles and clusters in the autumn. The seed collection for this species is typically around early November. Symphyotrichum nova angeli, or New England aster, is also a native perennial that occurs in moist prairies, meadows, and thickets. You'll also find it along stream banks. It's a really stout leafy plant that typically grows about 3 to 6 feet tall. It has a profuse bloom of these daisy-like flowers that are up to 1.5 inches in diameter. The flowers have these purple rays and yellow centers. It blooms from late summer through early fall. It also has these rough lance-shaped leaves that are up to 4 inches long and clasp or auriculate around the stiff, hairy stems. Seed collection for the species is also around early November. Giant ironweed is one of the tallest of the ironweeds and grows up to 10 feet tall. You're typically going to find it in low woodlands and along streams and valleys and in prairie edges that are a bit shaded. It has really stiff stems which branch towards the top. The leaves have irregular serrated margins, and the flowers have these, which are colored like rose purple, bloom from late summer into the fall. The flowers are then going to turn into these rust-colored seeds, which is one of the reasons for its common name. The species of ironweed does tend to hybridize with some other ironweeds, which can complicate plant identification. These tiny little hairs along the stem can be used to key out in the field. So smooth ironweed looks really similar to giant ironweed. The leaves of the smooth ironweed typically are smaller than that of the giant ironweed, and the flower head is more condensed than the smooth. That in comparison. So the collection time for the previous species that we cover are typically late summer through the fall. You'll know when the seeds are ready for all those species when you see the white fluff that begins to expand. Those are the scale, the bristles, or feather-like hairs that are attached to the seeds. Stems will also begin to turn brown. So like other members of the composite family, it's really easy. It's much easier to cut off the entire flower head and remove the chaff and the fluff from the seed in the area when you're sheltered from wind. Be sure to check your seeds. They should all be dark in color and plump. The flat seeds, again, are going to indicate that the embryo hasn't developed and the seeds are not yet ripe. In this next section, we're going to discuss all the rest of the species in our target list. So partridge pea is an annual flower in the legume family, and it typically grows 1 to 3 feet tall. It has large, showy yellow flowers that are about 1 inch across, and they bloom from the leaf axils in short clusters, as shown here. There you go. They flower from June through late September. Each flower has 5 rounded yellow petals and 10 stamen, which makes it really distinctive. The leaves are pinnately compound. Each leaf has 8 to 18 pairs of small, narrow, oblong leaflets. And these leaves are sensitive to daylight, so you'll see them folding in the afternoon as it starts to get dark. The seed pods are about 2.5 inches long, and the collection time for the species is typically in the fall. The seeds are going to ripen in the pods, which are going to turn from green to brown when they're ready to harvest. You want to split some of the pods open in the field to be sure that the seeds are brown and plump. If they're still green or they're thin, they're not ready for collection. It's easiest to collect these seeds, to collect the pods while you're in the field and wait till you're back home to open up the pods to collect the seeds. Geranium maculatum, or wild geranium, is a clump-forming native woodland perennial. You can typically find this in woodlands and in thickets and in shaded areas. It grows about 24 inches tall and about 18 inches wide, and its flowers are about 1¼ inch in diameter. They're colored pink to lilac, and they're saucer-shaped. They have these 5 petals here. The leaves are palmately lobed in sections of 5, and they grow up to 6 inches across. So their seeds have this distinctive beak appearance, which gives its common name of cranesbill. Collection time for this species is in early summer. This is one of the first species to bloom on our list. These seeds can be challenging to collect because the geranium, when they're ripe, the geranium plant will launch the seeds away from the parent plant. So you'll need to collect these seeds when they're still just a little bit green, when the carpel just begins to turn yellow. Then you want to allow the seeds to ripen in your bag. You want to store them in a cool, dry location for a couple weeks before you start to lightly smash the carpel to release the seed if it hasn't released on its own. Monarda fistulosa, or wild bergamot, occurs in dry soils and in prairies, in rocky woodlands, and in glade margins. It's a clump-forming mint family member, which typically grows 2 to 4 feet tall. Its flowers are lavender and have these 2-lipped tubular flowers in appearance, and they form in dense terminal heads on top of square stems, which is a key characteristic for all your mint families. The seeds are ready for harvest when the flower head turns from green to brown. Right, the ripe seed is tiny and found inside the tiny calyx tubes that make up the flower head. You want to remove any flower petals if there's any remaining and place the entire dried flower head into your collection bag. And when you're home, you can check for seeds at the bottom of your bag, and if need be, you can tap out the remaining seeds from the flower head. Penstemon digitalis, or foxglove beard tongue, can be found in mesic soil prairies, also in openings in uplands and floodplain forests and in woodland borders. This plant can grow up to 3 feet tall. This is also one of our early bloomers within the target species list. The leaves are variable in shape, but they tend to be ovate or broadly lanceolate. They grow up to 6 inches long and about 2.5 inches wide. The edges have these small, tiny teeth, and the leaf surface often appears shiny. The white flowers occur in a panicle on the top of individual stems, and they bloom from late spring to early summer for about a month. The collection time for the species is usually midsummer to fall. The seeds are going to ripen in these upright forming capsules that turn from green to brown when it's ready to harvest. The dried capsules can be turned upside down and emptied right into an envelope or collection bag. Pycanthemum tenuifolium, or narrow leaf mountain mint, typically grows in dry, open, rocky woods, in dry prairies and in fields, as well as along roadsides and stream banks. It is an erect, many-branched perennial that grows 2 to 3 feet tall. It has extremely narrow leaves, as shown here, and its flowers form in terminal clusters. They are small and white. They bloom from mid to late summer. Like other mints, they have a strong aroma of mint when crushed. The collection time for the species is typically late summer. The seed heads are going to turn from green to brownish gray when they're ripe. You want to cut off the entire seed head and put it into the collection bag to dry. And then you can mash the dried seed, the seed head in your hand onto a piece of paper when you're back home. Pycanthemum virginianum, or Virginia mountain mint, occurs typically in moist soils and wet meadows. It's also an erect, many-branched herbaceous perennial that grows 2 to 3 feet tall. The flowers form in somewhat appearing flat top terminal clusters. It blooms from mid to late summer. Again, like the other mints, it will exude a strong mint-like aroma when crushed. The collection time for this species is early fall. Seed heads are going to turn from green to grayish brown when ripe. Again, you want to cut off the entire seed head and put it into the collection bag to dry. After it's dried, you want to mash the dried seed head in your hand onto a piece of paper to release the seed from the calyx. Ohio spiderwort is an early bloomer and can be found in a wide variety of habitats. It grows 2 to 4 feet tall and is mostly unbranched. Its gray or blue-green alternate leaves grow up to 15 inches long and 1 inch across. The blue-violet flowers occur in small clusters on hairless stems on the top of the plant. The best time to collect the seeds for the species is in the midsummer. The seeds are going to ripen in capsules that are wrapped in the calyx, as shown here. It's best to start checking the seeds about 6 weeks after they bloom to see if they're ready. Seeds are typically intolerant of dried storage, but for ease of handling, cleave the seed and expedite the shipping to Mason as soon as you are able. This species will also be flowering and have its flowers open in the early morning and close as it comes later in the day. Culver's root occurs in moist meadows and prairies. It typically reaches 3 to 7 feet tall when it's in bloom. Its lance-shaped leaves form in whorls, 3 to 7 leaves per whorl. And its flower spikes are usually grow to about 9 inches long. They're made up of teeny tube-like white to pale blue flowers that form on the top, that open from the top down in the late spring to early summer. The collection time for the species is late summer. The teeny seeds form inside small woody capsules along the spike. The capsules are going to turn from yellow to brown when they're ready to harvest. You want to remove the entire spike and put that into your collection bag. The capsules need to be crushed to release the seed, as the seeds won't readily fall out. The last plant on our list is also one of our first bloomers. Zizioria, or golden alexandris, is one of the first species to bloom in the spring. You can find this occurring both in degraded and in higher quality habitats and environments. It grows up to be approximately 2.5 feet tall. Its leaves are compound with oddly pinnate or with 3 to 5 leaflets. The yellow flowers are flat to slightly rounded compound umbels, and they occur at the ends of the upper stems. Each umbel is about 2 to 3 inches across and consists of 12 umbellets. Collection for the species is going to begin in the summer when the seeds begin to ripen into capsules. The capsules again are going to turn from green to brown when they're ready to harvest. You want to remove the entire flower umbel and put it into your collection bag. You can rub the ripe capsules between your fingertips to release the seeds. I want to thank you all again for participating in Project Wingspan. Your efforts are very much appreciated. Again, very detailed plant profiles are available for download in Appendix A of the training manuals, where you'll find in-depth plant descriptions, key identified characteristics, multiple photos, and specifics on seed collection per species. Thank you all again.